There's a lot of books on my fantasy TBR, and it's like kind of a problem. If by problem you mean like I have a ton of fun stuff to read. What I want to do today in this video is talk you guys through all of the fantasy books that I've been putting off for like ever. I have a physical copy of them. I have no excuse not to just sit down and read them. So let's get started. First off, and most embarrassingly, the 5th season. Everyone I know loves this book, and I haven't read it yet. Truth be told, the reason that I put this off for so long is because I haven't been able to get the audiobook. I am just too stingy to use one of my Audible credits, which I shouldn't be. I should just pull the trigger. But getting it from the library is just, it's always like 30 weeks, and I just never actually place the hold, which means I never actually get the book. And so now I was able to get this from my local library. I got the hardcover, and I said, you know what? We're gonna do it. We're going to take the plunge. We're going to read this because I know I'm going to love it. So for those of you who don't know, N.K. Jemisin is an absolute juggernaut in the fantasy world. Many consider this series, the Broken Earth trilogy, to be her magnum opus. All 3 installments of this series won the Hugo Award. It's an absolute icon in the fantasy world. There's a beautiful mother-daughter relationship. The magic is supposed to be really interesting. It's set in a world called the Stillness, which is a future version of the Earth, where you have apocalyptic events that occur over the course of generations over and over again called seasons. And people have magic that can control the earth. So this is absolutely #1 on my TBR. Next up is Foundryside, which was released back in 2018. And since then, the series has grown. It follows main character Sanderson, and she is a thief. She is very much a criminal, slinking around in the underworld of this world where objects can be imbued with sentience. And someone with magic can touch them and unlock the object's secrets. And Sansa is one of those people. And she gets swept up in a heist. And hijinks ensue. Brandon Sanderson blurbed this, so there's no reason why I wouldn't really like this. It's said to be pretty fast-paced, and the magic system seems pretty compelling. For an adventure with a hard magic system, this seems to be a really good bet across the board, and considering I really like Mistborn, which falls into a similar category, I think that I'd really enjoy this. So this is next. Up next is Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is inspired by civilizations in the pre-Columbian Americas, and you have forbidden magic, and you just have a completely different culture. Most of Western fantasy is very Eurocentric. We're pulling on the same medieval European themes over and over again. Having something inspired by South America and its folklore should be really interesting. I got this for my birthday 3 years ago, and it's been on my shelf. I've always wanted to read it, and I've never had the occasion to pull it out. There's always been something on top of it. But now it is on the TBR. It is firmly on the TBR, and I will read this. Next, Assassin's Apprentice. I've already read this. I read it in 2020, and I remember feeling like it was fine. It follows Fitz, who's a bastard son of a king. And from what I remember, he's just kind of like depressed the whole time and like bummed out and like not very good at anything. And then at the end, everything starts to change for him. And he goes off on a series of adventures over the rest of the Farseer trilogy. And here's the thing. Everyone loves Robin Hobb. I swear everyone I talk to who's read Hobb and Hobb is like, I would read all 30 of her books over and over and over again, and I'd never read anything except Robin Hobb ever again for the rest of my life. And I read this and I was like, this is fine, but I want to give it another chance. I want to read not just the first book, I want to read the second one, and I want to see, is Robin Hobb something that can actually be for me? Because when I read this, I didn't have a really good foothold in the fantasy genre yet. This was one of the first epic fantasy novels that I read. I don't think that I really had an appreciation for it or a desire to keep reading in the series. And so I'm excited to see if I like it more now that I've read much more in the genre and that I have a bigger commitment to reading more in the series, because I feel like Robin Hobb could be really interesting. And I've written her other books off, but like, I want to make sure that I'm making an informed decision and not just say that I don't like Robin Hobb based on the experience I had 5 years ago with a book when I wasn't really into fantasy. So this is back on the list. And now we have another book that I've tried, but I want to try again, and that is The Blade Itself by Abercrombie. For those of you who don't know, Abercrombie writes grimdark fantasy. So you follow a whole bunch of really unlikable characters who are doing a lot of really unsavory stuff. I mean, the first blurb is from George R.R. Martin, the guy who wrote Game of Thrones, and his description of this is bloody and relentless. So if the dude who wrote Game of Thrones said that this is bloody and relentless, like, that should tell you how fucked up this story is. I read, I think, like 70% of the first book, and I was like, that's just a whole bunch of people that I don't like. Good things, they're kind of a bummer. And it wasn't really for me. But once again, other people in my life have read the whole series and say that there is incredible payoff in the second 2 books in the series. And like, I have all 3 of them. I bought the box set. I am that dummy. And so I might as well just go ahead and read the whole thing. Like, there's actually nothing stopping me except for myself. Like, I have all of the tools. I have the books. I have the eyeballs. So I might as well try. And I think it's another one of those things where it is such a big pillar in the fantasy genre, and I feel like so many things are inspired by it, that even if I don't like it, it feels like it's important to have read to be able to understand the rest of the genre and the things that are building upon what Joe Abercrombie was able to accomplish. Then we have a little classic, Peter Pan, which is like OG fantasy. I have this beautiful copy of it with these darling illustrations. To die will be an awfully big adventure. Like, it's beautiful. I want to read it. And I want to read the original story. J.M. Barrie is a master storyteller. I've had this copy forever, and it's such a foundation for the fantasy that came afterwards, and it's also such a beautiful story. I know that I loved the film growing up, and I'd love to read the source material, and I have this beautiful copy of it. So why not actually read it? Up next, we have The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England by Brandon Sanderson. I've tried to read this book twice already. And both times I go, and started reading something else. I just can't believe that I wouldn't enjoy something that Brandon Sanderson has written as a huge Sanderson fan. I reread the entire Cosmere in 2024, and I loved every second of it. And so the fact that I can't get into something that Brandon Sanderson has written, I just it feels unfathomable to me. And I also just want to read all of The Secret Project. And I have the physical copy of this. I might as well thug it out and actually read it. So basically the premise of this is you have this guy who wakes up in what looks a lot like medieval England, but doesn't remember anything about who he is, and no one knows who he is. And he starts to pick up these handbook pages that explain about buying your own dimension. And he starts to remember more and more about who he is, but he has to survive in this version of medieval England that is entirely hostile to him. And he has to figure out how to make do. And so that's the premise, which is pretty exciting. And I don't know why I haven't been able to get into it. If I know anything about Brandon Sanderson, the payoff at the end of this book is going to be crazy. So I'm going to give this a third go. Next up is the first book in the Lockwood Co series. But this was adapted onto Netflix, and I absolutely loved it. It's about an alternate universe where there are ghosts, and the only people who can see ghosts are children. And so children are conscripted into these ghost hunting companies, really, who make money off of going into people's homes and banishing their ghosts. And Lockwood Co is like a for kids by kids ghost hunting company. I loved the show, but it was canceled after the first season, and there's a huge cliffhanger. And I was like, you know who probably answers the cliffhanger? The author. I bought this at a bookstore in Stockholm, and my principle for buying physical books tends to be, if I'm in the store and I want to buy a book, I have to know that I want to read it right away. Otherwise, it's going to sit on my shelf for years like all of the other books that I've shown you. If I'm adding something to my collection, knowing that I have such a long TBR, it has to be something that is going to cut the line and go straight to number one. And I truly thought that this was that. But then I picked up Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood, which is her YA chess love story. And I was like, this is amazing. And so I obviously got swept up in that. And then forgot all about this because then I went on an Ali Hazelwood speedrun, as it were. And so this fell back onto the TBR, and then we play the game over and over again where there's always something more interesting, and then it languishes away on my shelf. And that's not fair because I still do care about this plot twist. It's been years, and I deserve to figure it out. Also, it's middle grade, so it shouldn't really be that hard to read. And look at how big the font is. Oh yeah, that should be great. So this is definitely back on the menu, boys. And then lastly is like the OG fantasy herself, the Illiad. Specifically, Emily Wilson's version. The Illiad is one of Homer's two great epic poems, and the Illiad chronicles the Trojan Wars. It itself is a collection of folkloric stories. You have the Greek civilization that Homer was a part of, and they're surrounded by the ruins of another civilization. And so they came up with a whole bunch of stories to explain how these ruins got here and the mythology of this old civilization, and that's where you get a lot of the tales for the Trojan War. Not a historical event. It's a set of stories that had been told orally for generations that Homer compiled into one big epic poem. And Emily Wilson is the first woman to translate the Illiad into English. And this is notable because it's an incredibly female-driven story. Having this translated by a woman means that a lot of the nuances are going to come off very differently. And it's also supposed to be just like a pretty nice translation of the Illiad. And I haven't read it, and I was lucky enough to get it once again, my local library. And so I know that I want to read the Illiad, and having this specific edition is definitely a driver for me to actually do it. It's something that I'm excited about, and it's a conversation that I want to be a part of. So this is the last fantasy book that is on my TBR. That's kind of like what's on my TBR. As always, I had a great time yip-yapping about books, and I'm so happy that you're here. I'll see you soon.